Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today. We are doing a little bit of a different flavor than what we normally do with the live video talks, but super excited to have some of the most awesome folks on the Hotman Group team here joining me. Thank you all on this lovely Friday. How's everybody doing today?
Great. How are you?
I am good, ready for the weekend as always. Yes. Well, we're going to do something very real today in that we often see reports from companies, especially SaaS platforms, that there's just questions and things that need to be brought up when you look at them. Brittany, who's on with us today, she comes from a healthcare background, so very deep entrenched in HIPAA. And so the example that we're going to use today, completely 100% anonymized, but it is a real thing. It's a HIPAA based. And so we're just going to pull this up, take a look at it, and just kind of share with you guys like what is our thought process as practitioners when we see audit reports like this? How do we process them? How do we look at them? Because what you don't want to do is just take an audit report and go, oh, okay, they have it, check, done, everything must be perfect. That's not reality. And then when you really start to dig into these reports, uh-oh, there's some common themes that we're seeing a lot these days. So without further ado, I'm going to share on the screen here. This is a HIPAA compliance audit report. Jacayla, I think you are sharing this. So feel free to kind of scroll through this. Again, very anonymized, but this is based on a real report that we got in a real situation. And so, who wants to jump in first to help our audience understand, like, wow, this is great. SaaS platform, HIPAA compliant, have the report to prove it. Looks like it came from an audit firm. Man, this is awesome. What are the things we should be thinking here? What are the things we should be looking at? Who wants to start us off?
Yeah, I'll hop in. Just the first thing, any audit, right, is we need to talk about scoping.
Yep.
So on that, second page, right, there's a kind of a brief overview of their quote unquote scoping. Um, you know, Mentions broadly some HIPAA rules, but no really system level descriptions, right? So
Yeah.
before any audit, you really need to define scope, what systems, data, workflows are included, where does that PHI live? That's kind of what's missing here. So, if you don't
Yeah.
define where the PHI lives, how do you assess whether it's protected or not?
Exactly.
Yeah, excellent point, Brittany. And yes, what is the scope here? It says that the scope was the portions of HIPAA. Okay, that's more the approach and the methodology.
Mhm.
And what was used as the baseline, that's not actually the scope. The scope is something very different. It's what systems are included, what workflows, what data, all of that. Elaborate a little further, Brittany. Great points. Why would the reader care? Why is this not sufficient enough?
If you don't have, what I see from real HIPAA reports, so, we have clear system boundaries, data flow diagrams, defined in scope assets. You need to have that definition of scope because basically what this is telling you is without the clear scope, what's the assurance you get? There's like a false sense of security. If it's not clearly defined, what are you getting from this report?
Yep. Excellent feedback. So, bottom line, you go back to the whoever gave you this report and were like, all this is all well and fine, but I have
Mhm.
no idea the scope that this was included, and they should be able to articulate that down to something that looks more like a system boundary and a data flow diagram. If you look at a SOC 2 report, for example, if it's done by a reputable CPA firm, that whole section 3 is going to be breaking down what that system boundary is. If you look at an SSP, something that would be aligned to CMMC, you're going to have those sections that talk about the system boundary and what's in scope and what's out of scope. And this right here is just severely lacking. Is this the only time we've seen a report like this?
Oh,
Absolutely not.
oh,
Unfortunately not. And then companies get this stuff and they're like, see, it's all good. It's HIPAA compliant. What's HIPAA compliant? Hey, Tanya, I remember a project we did a couple of years ago where a company told us hands down they had endpoint management and absolutely every system, every endpoint was in their endpoint management solution. And I want to say when we dug in, it was like a third were lacking. I don't know
yep.
if you remember that.
Yeah, it does feel familiar. That does feel
Yeah.
familiar.
So it's real easy to say, oh, yeah, everything's great. And this right here is actually a GRC tool output uh, being handed out related to an audit firm, but but coming out of one of those tools. And so if you don't have, Brittany, to your point, if you don't have clear definition of scope and what's set up in that platform, the output can show anything, but what is it actually reflecting?
Right.
Awesome.
Great point. Kayla?
Yeah. So I want to start off by saying I think there's a lot of issues with this report, but I'm gonna scroll down. We're gonna get into the findings a little bit or the
Oh, perfect. That are super
actual
tiny, by
bit.
the way.
Oh, hold on. That is good to know. There we go. Is that better?
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. So I want to, the first one I want to hit on is the whole 100% compliant, zero findings thing. I tend to do a lot of internal audits for our clients, and I'm not gonna lie, there have been times where I'm reviewing something and I'm like, wow, this looks good, this looks good, this looks way too good. But usually when I slow down, you really dig into it. It's not that they're doing everything right, is that there's generally just still areas where things could be tighter, right? So even if a client is technically compliant, there almost always opportunities for improvement, which we call OFIs. And just small things where they could strengthen the control, clean up documentation, make things more consistent to show proper implementation, right? So for this report, I want to sort of draw attention to what is it, 3.8 A, let's risk analyzed. A genuine risk analysis under HIPAA is one of the most scrutinized controls I think that exists. OCR specifically looks at whether the risk analysis is thorough, documented, current. There's no OFI on scope. There's no note on whether it was updated after the system changed. Nothing on methodology, just conforming. So that alone would make any auditor just kind of pause.
Yes, I totally agree. You mentioned that a report with no exceptions like that kind
Mhm.
of causes you a little bit of angst
Mhm.
because, I mean, you would rather see a report with exceptions.
Something to, I mean, conforming is just not enough. So, just something that, I would probably lean more towards OFIs. Just where can there be improvements at? Nothing's ever like completely perfect. So, exception could work. It just depends.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the SOC 2 world, everybody's like, "Oh, my report was 100% clean. Yay." And that feels like, "Oh, we're celebrating that." And if that's real, that's real. That's great. But to your point, Shaquille, I totally agree. A lot of times it makes me wonder, wait, how thorough was the audit? Like, did we really dig in? Was it really thorough? Because the reality is, this isn't about being perfect. This is about mitigating risk, is what it is. And that is just as much art as it is science. And so your point, I 1,000% agree with you that it's if it's 100% clean, that's great. But then it makes you kind of go, okay, but is that just reflective of the level of effort on the audit? And those are great questions we should ask. Like, tell me how this audit was done. Tell me how it was conducted. And if I take that back to this report, it doesn't, I don't know what was done. That's a big piece of what I'm seeing on the screen here. You brought up a risk assessment for HIPAA. I'm sure Brittany will shake her head when we say this. That is incredibly important to PHI and to HIPAA, doing annual risk assessment. Companies have gotten so many passes over the years because they did risk assessments. And that really is such a huge piece of HIPAA's what's a huge piece of cybersecurity in general, honestly, if we're being real, is identifying the risks. What are the risks? What are the risks in the case of HIPAA specific to PHI? Do I know where those things live? That goes back to Brittany's comments about scope. And did I assess against those? Very super important. But when I look at this, the company has conducted an accurate and thorough assessment of it. It doesn't actually tell me anything. Oh, okay. They've done
Yeah.
to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay, that's the cybersecurity CIA triad. of EPHI held in its system. The system we don't know because it wasn't defined in the scope. And it doesn't actually say what they do. Again, you would expect this to be, instead of being default out of the box language, you would expect this to be something to the effect of the company conducts at least an annual risk assessment. This is its general high level methodology. It has a risk appetite, a risk tolerant. They make sure they treat risks that are outside of that. Like all of that is missing here. It's just risk analyzed. And then what we know about the a lot of the GRC platforms, especially the ones on the lower end, they come out of the box with risks. And so the company just click, 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 and click, 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 and I did my risk assessment. Did I talk to the stakeholders across the organization? Did I really look at where data flowed? And did I really dig into identifying that risk? Like this right here gives me no warm and fuzzy that any of that was actually done.
Exactly.
And
I'd even piggyback off that when you
yeah,
said level of
please.
effort. I mean, when you have sub controls, like you have to be able to assess those distinct controls, right? That's like checking what a box 20 times and all 20 came back conforming with zero, opportunities for improvement. At a minimum, you'd expect some sort of note on, timelines, when it was tested, how it was documented, that sort of thing. So, yeah, to your point, level of effort is really low.
Yeah. And then all of I don't know if y'all are bringing this up, but I see this all API based evidence. So again, we know this report came out of a GRC tool. And so all API evidence, well, risk assessment is not an API based process. Vulnerability management might be, but this commingles risks with vulnerability management. And so again, I'm not getting a warm and fuzzy. And that would be one thing I would say to the audience. If you look at this, I mean, like there's a certain measure of this of trust your gut, right? Like I'm not seeing what I'm expecting to see. I'm not seeing details that I'm expecting to see. And so trust that. And then what should they do with that?
Right. If I can, again, piggyback off of that whole risk thing, right? So, I mean, with all ADA controls and compliance, every control is conforming. Like, what do you, like, if this was coming from my organization, right? What do you do with this? Um, if everything's fine, where do you focus your time and budget? You know what I mean? This is not reality. So, like, obviously one thing you'll notice across the entire report, there's really no prioritization, no risk findings, and really no like recommendations.
Yeah, this really doesn't do much good. Because yeah, like you were just saying, if you need to fight for budget for some sort of implementation and the execs are looking at this and ask you, well, why do you need budget for that? That everything's fine. So yeah, just pretty doesn't do you much service in the long run.
Yeah, and if this is just an external facing report, which it might be,
True.
then it might be okay that it doesn't have that. But to your point, again, I just go back to SOC 2. There's opportunity for, here's what we looked at, here's the design of the control, here's what was tested, here's what we looked at, and then here was the result of that. So that would be a more like normal kind of testing procedure versus, nope, everything's fine. But if I read through this, I really don't even know what they're doing. Now, if this is the internal facing report as well, to your points, then you're right. It's not really doing the organization much service because where is those really rooms for improvement? Great feedback.
Sure. The next thing I kind of want to touch on is sort of the generic non-defensible evidence descriptions, which you touched on a bit earlier, but I wanted to pull in a specific example. So if we look at this first one right here, facility access controls implemented.
Yeah.
The auditor just reads evidence review deemed sufficient. All API based evidence may be subject to further requests. Okay, well, what API is pulling whether a server room door has a keypad or visitor logs exist, badge access records were reviewed. Like I just don't think there's an API for that. Maybe I'm behind the curve, but that's a physical walkthrough or a document pull in order for you to, determine if that is actually working as it should.
Yeah. And UARs, user access reviews, you should do that on your physical access as well. Where was evidence of that review? because that's part of the physical access controls implemented, and then making sure, monitoring and staying on top of those as well. Really great feedback. The point is, here's the point. You can't, unfortunately, everybody's so busy and overwhelmed and just trying to keep on any given day. It's easy to receive these reports and say, oh, yeah, they have it. Oh, yeah, they gave it. Yeah, they got it. But when you really open it, you've got to use your critical thinking to be like, hey, wait a minute, is this really sufficient? I love to say this, third party risk management is, what was that third word? Risk. So why do we do that activity? Risk. Okay, it's not third party checkbox management. It's not third party, oh my gosh, I got to pass my audit management. It's not that. It's third party what? Risk management. So we get these reports for the purpose of risk. So if this is not helping us reduce our risk of using this supplier, this SaaS tool, this service, whatever it is, then it's wasted exercise. It's missing the whole point. And so the things you are bringing up are great questions that would then help us as using this particular product or service to bring our comfort level of risk down. But if I don't have what I need in here, then guess what? This may not be worth anything to me, and I may need to attack the risk position a different way.
Great.
What else?
I think I'm gonna jump into my big one. I think
Oh,
we'll have
you're holding the big one?
I'm holding the
Okay,
big
well, go
one.
for it. Jump into the big one.
Let's see, this is page 3. Let's go to page 2. So, um, we'll also notice in that far right column, it's just an over reliance on API references. So, well, in automated tools, so don't get me wrong, these tools are useful. They streamline processes. They, help improve efficiency. But I don't think it's the same as validating something. So if an auditor is just pulling a screenshot or reports from a tool, whether rather than performing the actual verification of it, then I just see it as a problem. Just
Agreed.
tools should enhance the work, right? And you touched on it a bit too. There's still a critical thinking or professional judgment that is involved in it. So automation just doesn't tend to capture the full context of everything, especially when there's inconsistency. So
Very well said.
yeah, let's look at where to go? Security controls. Oh no, that's the wrong one. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Let's go to security awareness training implemented. So for this one specifically, Brittany, keep me honest. I think that it requires that all workforce members complete training, right? So an API from a training platform, I guess it could show completion record, right? But I guess the bigger question is, did the auditor cross-reference that against the full employee roster, where contractors included, where new hires onboarded within that required window? API-based evidence doesn't necessarily answer any of that for us.
Yeah.
Right. I think it says too that the policies exist, right? But what you're saying is basically, are we confirming that they're followed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then in the HIPAA world, those who can touch PHI should typically, companies, they get different training or additional training. If you have 1,000 people in your company, you may only require 100 of them to get HIPAA specific training because they touch it and use it every day. And so a lot of times that's how the program is built as well. But again, all of that is absent here, which means you would ask those questions. And so what, the whole point of an audit, an external audit, is so I can rely upon it. Back in the day, y'all are all too young for this, but back in the day, if I needed to check the risk posture of a supplier, I had to actually audit them. And it's hard, it's painful, it's time consuming, it's expensive. And so this whole concept of getting reputable auditors, this is why, CPAs are excellent candidates for that, getting reputable auditors to come in and do an external independent audit and then issue a report. Now we can rely upon that report. So I don't have to personally go into this company and be like, okay, give me this, and have to bear the expense and the time burden of doing that. I can just look at the report and rely upon it. That's the system that was designed. Unfortunately, the implementation has been grossly distorted and broken. So let me ask you guys this. If this is, I mean, this is not our risk, but if this is our risk at Hotman Group and we're working to use this product or service, can we rely upon this report?
I mean, there's a little bit of disconnect from reality, so I would say no.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
we now have to go in and basically do our own due diligence and do our own audit. We get this report and it's like, I don't see what was tested. I don't see what's done. I see a copy paste all the way down. I see language that very much aligns to the regulatory. I know it's nothing more than an export of a tool. I see tools all the time that are misconfigured and pieces and parts are missing. I don't see a scope defined, which gives me absolutely no assurance that this testing was even done on an appropriate scope and that that was validated. And so, yes, we can't rely upon this, which means we're right back to we need to do our own audit and our own due diligence because there is very little that we can rely upon in this. And that just defeats the whole purpose of doing an external audit, quite frankly.
Yep.
And more customers that figure that out, and that's why I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Like more companies that realize if you can't rely upon the audit report, it might as well not exist. So stop paying for audits that really don't provide the value. Even though, there's been this huge commoditization of really working to bring the cost of audits down, which is why we're seeing a lot of this stuff, is because, they're being pressured to do the audit for $2,000. And to your point, Jakayla, a human can't go in with their critical thinking and go through and really do all of that because it takes more than to pay $2,000 or $1,000. So all they're really doing is exporting from a tool, doing a cursory pass of what's in the tool, and okay, there's the report, and moving on to the next one. But again, that defeats the whole purpose of why we even do external audits. And then Tanya, you said something earlier. Elaborate on that. What is that? How is that serving? It's a disservice to the customers, but how is it a disservice internally as well?
Yeah, like I was saying, if you're aware of some issues that you'd like to have budget for to fix, say you need a new policy set, or for example, AI is huge, you don't have a policy for that, you need some governance around that. Gonna be really hard to get budget or funding, if you present this sort of report to the folks in charge of determining if you should be awarded that. Because why would they, based off of this? Everything looks fine. Cool. Fine. But yeah, you're really kind of blocking your own progress by using this sort of stuff.
Yeah, very well said. It's the tension between, but I've got to be successful with audit,
Mm-hmm.
but I still need to operate with integrity to actually protect the organization. And Brittany, maybe you could talk a little bit about this. HIPAA is so like broad and non-specific,
Right.
where it's like, that's great to turn it into a checkbox, but then that's really not the intent. It's kind of broad and unspecific on purpose.
Yeah, it is. And that's because HIPAA really, was built to span across so many different levels of medical care, right? Like you have large or like hospitals and organizations all the way down to, your rural medical office somewhere. And all these people have to comply with this particular framework. And so, that's why there is a lot of room for interpretation with HIPAA. But I mean, HIPAA is huge on risk, right? Where's that PHI? How are you protecting it? And then we really need to see that operational validation. Like you can't just say something is conforming, right? You need to, how is it conform? How do you prove that your control is actually working in real life?
Yeah. I don't
Oof.
think this report would work with the regulators. What do you think?
No, unfortunately, no, you know. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because I was looking through and a couple of them, I think on page like 7 or 8 was talking about like workstation, implemented device and disposal. I can't tell you how many times, that's just not reality, right? Conforming on all workstation and media controls. It's, we don't see that ever really. So I mean, there's always gaps in those areas.
Yeah.
Oh,
I actually have another example with
please go for it.
the no evidence of testing, or that
Yeah.
versus design versus operating effectiveness. Like, so if we look at the contingency plan tested and revised, I think that is something that's really big because we believe in redundancy and all of that, right? But for this specific control, it just the requirements that you actually test the plan. But the auditor come in just says evidence was reviewed and deemed sufficient, right? So what does that mean, right? What was reviewed? A policy that says we will test our contingency plan that confirms that the plan exists, not that it necessarily that it works. So for this control specifically, you'd want to see actual test results, like the date the test was conducted, who participated, what was revised afterwards, because you realize that it needed to be adjusted, right? Without that, you're just confirming design only, and design compliance is not the same, as operating effectiveness, aka governance.
Right. It's like passing a test before you check all the answers. Like that's how I feel.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, that's interesting. You passed the test, but wait a minute, did we really dig in and
Let me
check
go
the
back and check the
details?
answers. Right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a great analogy. Wow, it's unfortunate. But yeah, no, this is really great feedback. And yeah, Jacayla, to your contingency plan, your tabletops. That's a people exercise. That's not a tool exercise. Did people
Exactly.
communicate? Did the right people engage? Do they know their part? Do they understand the roles and responsibility? Like that's actually what you're doing. And then the revision, um, you highlighted it, but how do you revise it? You revise it because you exercise it. And after you exercise it, you know what to revise. You know what's not working. There are other sources of revising it, but testing it is a lot of source of that. But yeah, it's just interesting. And periodic. What is periodic? Once every, you know, secret something moon thing. I don't even know what I'm talking about, but is
Yeah.
it what is
Blue moon.
periodic? Because it should be at least annually, right? Like that's what it should be, to
Mhm.
your point. So really, really great feedback. Okay, anything else glaring that you guys want to highlight on this to help people understand what is the mechanism, why it's important, and what should we be thinking as we see this kind of stuff? The green checkbox looks great on paper, but oh my gosh, it is so dangerous. And this is nothing more than a big old green checkbox.
Yeah. So I feel like the biggest glaring thing, right, is that everything's conforming. I mean, we've said it multiple times on here, but if everything's compliant, it's like we check the system and here's what it told us, but now it's like we have to go back and actually verify it, right? So kind of when you put all of that together, it's the biggest issue isn't that, something may be missed. It's the issues the report gives the impression that nothing was missed. And so,
Exactly.
that's where that, disconnect is. That's the
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, I love that. I threatened to make t-shirts that says it would just be better to do nothing.
Right.
To what you
Honestly.
said.
About
Yeah.
the same. Yeah.
Yeah, a false sense of security is more
Right.
dangerous, in my opinion, than just doing nothing.
Right.
Because at least doing nothing, maybe you'll at least trip over the problems and
Mhm.
maybe see them and do something with them as you come across them. But unfortunately, and Tanya, what you alluded to as well, but creating this false sense of security that everything is great and everything is perfect and, it's entirely 100% in place, even though we have no idea what that even means. Um, yeah, that's dangerous. That's really dangerous because ultimately, we should be about protecting data and people and companies and all of the above. And that is really what we're working to achieve here in cybersecurity, not passing audits. Okay, any other final closing thoughts? Fun dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've hit on
Yeah, a lot of
it's a
it.
lot wrong with it. It's a lot.
Yes, and we're not just picking on this one. This just is low-hanging fruit to have this dialogue. The reality is we see this all the time. And it's not just out of a GRC tool, which this one happens to be. It's also SOC 2 reports. It's also ISO report. Like we've seen it all. The
Oh
whole
yeah.
checkbox audit thing is real, and this is just proof that this is what it is. And, shame on customers for accepting this stuff, which is part of why we had this dialogue today, is don't accept this. If this is acceptable with no questions and no further due diligence, then that's on you to do that. And that's just the harsh reality of what we're seeing here. And it's not just this one, but it's rampant. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for your amazing insight and wisdom. Always a pleasure. And thank you, audience, for taking the time to listen to this today. And if you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out. As you can tell, we're all a bunch of nerds and we love doing this stuff. And ultimately, it really is about protecting people and data, and that's what we're fighting the good fight to keep pursuing. Thank you all so much. Thanks everyone for taking the time. Have a great day.